The text focuses on the life of Celie and her progression. Celie starts out the novel as a meek, independent shell of a person. Then she sees Shug, and to Celie, Shug represents an independent woman, free from male control. This is what Celie desires the most, so she becomes obsessed with her. Celie then becomes dependent on Shug for independence. Yet what she does not realize is that she is even less independent than when Shug was not in her life. It is not until Celie has the strength to leave Shug that she is truly independent. This is because she breaks free from her dependence on Shug. Celie represents women everywhere during the time period in which the novel is set, oppressed, in fear, and unequal. Celie's case is a rather hyperbolic one, though, experiencing sexism, racism, homophobia, and the worst one of all, her own mind. Her mind tortures her for her inadequacies, and this makes her truly afraid to express her identity to herself. This was and still is the case for many African American women. Celie overcoming her adversities is the message that Walker conveys to the readers about how independence will set them free. I lay there thinking about Nettie while he on top of me. Then I think about Shug Avery. I know what he doing to me he done to Shug Avery, and maybe she like it. I put my arm around him. Even though Celie has not met Shug yet, she decides to pretend like what Albert is doing, just because Shug might. This shows how much she dreams to be her own person. It is well established that Celie views Shug as the quintessential independent woman. What can only be going through her mind in this moment is how she can be like Shug Avery at this moment. In this moment, when she acts like Shug would, she feels independent, but to reiterate, she is less independent than when she was before this. I wash and comb out her hair. She got the naughtiest, shortiest, kinkiest hair I ever saw, and I loves every strand of it. The hair that come out in my comb I kept. Maybe one day I'll get a net, make me a rat to pump up my own hair. It may not seem like it, but this is the point in the novel where Celie is the most desperate for independence. It also happens that she is madly in love with Shug at this point. Her situation has gotten to the point where she is going to change her physical appearance in order to look more like Shug, or look like an independent woman. But I'm a woman. I love you, I say. Whatever happened, whatever you do, I love you. Slowly through the novel, Celie has been becoming her own person, and at this moment she finally completes her lifelong journey. For most of her life, she has been so dependent on Shug, leaving her would not be a possibility. Even if she did, it would be Celie begging Shug to get back together. But now, she sheds that dependence, and in turn, she has Shug's independence and confidence without Shug herself. Even though that decision took a major toll on her emotions, her newfound strength and empowerment that Albert was keeping from her is what helps her hold out. It is obvious that Nettie was the favored child. She was sent to school, for all we know. Celie was not. Celie was also raped twice by Alfonso. Nettie was not. So from early on, Celie grew vehemently opposed towards men, associating most with violent rapists. Nellie never had to deal with the atrocities that Celie had to endure. Because Nettie was sent to school, she was educated and knew how to read and write correctly. I feel bad sometimes Nettie done pass me in learning, but look like nothing she can say can get in my brain and stay. She tried to tell me something about how the ground not being flat, I just say yeah, like I know it. I never tell her how flat it looked to me. The men that Celie and Nettie marry and the way that they are married are completely different. Celie was married to Albert, a wife-beating, alcoholic, unfaithful, and abusive man. Their marriage was arranged, with no love on either side. Nettie married Samuel, who is a polar opposite to Albert. He is a kind and compassionate missionary who loves Nettie. Their marriage was completely out of love on both sides. Their marriage reflects the way each sister sees men. As we know, Celie dislikes men, formed by her life experiences. Nettie, who never had to deal with that, views men as romantic partners because she has no reason to mistrust them. Because of this, she can and did form a healthy relationship with men. Celie represents What happens when sexism and racism converge onto one individual? All of these led her to become majorly oppressed. All of this led her to not have the confidence to speak for herself about her situation. Sadly, this was, and maybe still is, the reality for African American women, at least for the majority, but there are some exceptions. Nettie represents this exception. She is strong enough to break free from her oppressors and in turn passes that confidence on to others. In this way, Walker is telling African American women that are not oppressed to pass on their strength to those who aren't so fortunate to create a society where African American women can live oppression free.
Nettie's trip to Africa. This experience brought upon letters written by Nettie had an uplifting tone which is unusual to the letters Seeley writes to God. Walker includes his narrative point of view to show the contrary of racism towards black people in America through Nettie's experience in Harlem and Africa in terms of being welcomed. Well, we got here, and I thought I would never get the kinks out of my hips from being carried in a hammock like the whole way. The Olinka tribe treated Nettie and her crew like royalty when they got to the Olinka village, which contrasts to the racism towards black people in America. Everybody in the village crowded around us. How Nettie and the other missionaries are being welcomed is dissimilar to how Seeley and other black people are welcomed in the U.S. The contrast of Seeley and Nettie's lives show a spectrum of the goal of the African American community being achieved to uplift themselves from racism. As Nettie's Olinka experience continues, history begins to repeat itself. Deja vu. Men, specifically white men, were the only people who were guaranteed access to an education in the early 20th century and have been for centuries before. The Olinka do not believe girls should be educated. They are also said to be vulnerable, as their husband determines their self-worth because they are able to mate with them and have children. A girl is nothing to herself, only to her husband can she become something. Like slavery, these events show how white men display dominance of their inferior and how women were not considered to have the capabilities of men. The dominance of men is seen through how others interact with them, such as when Nettie and Celia interact with their father. To look in a man's face is a brazen thing to do. They look inside at his feet or his knees. The rubber manufacturer company from England oppresses the Olinka as they colonize their land for capital gain. The huge mansion and the army that was ordered by the white governor are the little depictions that emphasize the recollection of slavery. The whole territory, including the Olinka's village, now belongs to a rubber manufacturer in England. Walker emphasizes color in this passage to show how the world creates hate in various ways. Color was also emphasized to show how black life is not limited. There was sexism somewhat represented through the typical gender roles of the men and women of the Olinka tribe, which is a larger representation of gender roles in America. Sophia's jail sentence. Walker includes his point of view through Seeley's perspective to show how African Americans are easily oppressed, which is still seen today. We want to jump in, she say. Sophia say no, take the children home. Police just have their guns on him anyway. One move, he dead. Six of them, you know. Brutality towards African Americans is one form of the white man's racist remarks towards them. This is evident through Miss Millie's interaction with Sophia. When Miss Millie asked if she would be her maid, Sophia told her hell no, and Miss Millie was shocked, already looking at her unequally to her peers. The sheriff already concluded that Sophia was crazy for that crime. In a battle of racism and sexism, black women are the most oppressed. Also, when Sophia declined Miss Millie's job offer, Sophia was seen as a superior and was not scared of Miss Millie's status. And Miss Millie, in shock, also felt threatened and alerted the white people witnessing their interaction. Sophia is beaten, in which the superiority hoped they had brought back fear among her. This shows that through all adversity, she has achieved the goal of African Americans to uplift themselves from racism. Sophia got 12 years of imprisonment for slapping the mayor in defense. She also suffered from harsh working conditions, which is a form of systematic racism. All day long from 5 to 8 she washing clothes, dirty convict uniforms, nasty sheets, and blankets piled way over her head. This is another way of inflicting fear towards African Americans. I'm a good prisoner, she said. Best convict they ever see. African American life is already limited due to oppression alone. The fact that Sophia's only motivation is to be a good prisoner shows how the prison system increases the limitations of African Americans' motivations in life. The imprisonment of an innocent African American takes a toll on the African American community too. Sophia's children lost more than their mother, but a guide for most of their childhood. It was not until Miss Millie, not Sophia's boss, allowed Sophia to see her children for a short time that Sophia's children didn't realize what they were missing.